It only took 5 seconds of using this build for me to completely fall in love with it. In a world of ability-focused gameplay, there's something that just feels so right about a setup that puts the focus on the guns themselves. And thanks to the massive hand cannon buffs and a carefully curated kit to support them, this build will have you one-shotting everything from unsuspecting Thrall to even the tankiest Grandmaster Nightfall champions. And with today's build lesson, I've also got a MOBALYTIcs written guide link down in the description below that you can use to reference this entire build at any time. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this presentation of what is quickly becoming what I believe to be one of the strongest and most fun builds in all of Destiny. As the thumbnail suggests, it all begins with the Lucky Pants Exotic Hunter boots, an armor piece that you probably never thought you would see featured in a build video. But please hold your skepticisms until the end, as I promise you'll be converted quite quickly, just as I was. These guys have a pretty hefty description, so let me break down piece by piece what they do and how they work. Upon drawing a fully loaded kinetic or matching subclass element hand cannon, you receive a stacking buff per hand cannon hit for 5.5 total seconds, with each stack granting 60% increased hand cannon damage, maxing out at 600% after 10 hits. After that 5.5 second period has expired, or if you swap weapons, you'll receive the Out of Luck debuff for 10 seconds that prevents you from gaining stacks or reacquiring the damage buff. Basically a cooldown period for the boot's damage buff to recharge. Additionally, this Lucky Pants damage buff also stacks with other damage buffs like Radiant and Boot Surge mods, something we'll go more into detail about later in the video. But first, I want to note that you can actually activate this buff without swapping weapons at all, simply by pulling out your Ghost while holding the hand cannon and pressing the fire button to draw the hand cannon back out. Consider drawing your mouse cursor over to those like and subscribe buttons if you didn't know that before this video. Now, since this is a weapon-centric build, I want to mix up the usual order of our build video format and discuss the best hand cannon pairings to go along with the Lucky Pants before venturing over to our complementary abilities, aspects, and fragments. Specifically, I want to take a look at 3 exotic hand cannons in particular in Malfeasance, Ariana's Vow, and Crimson. Malfeasance is a great option with this build. Due to its 20-round magazine, it can fire off non-stop without the need to reload for the entirety of the Lucky Pants damage boost. The only downside is that the Explosive Shadow exotic perk is not buffed by Lucky Pants whatsoever. Yet in activities with unstoppable champions, or simply for those who enjoy the gun, it's still a great pairing with the boots. Option number 2 is the Ariana's Vow, which makes up for its limited ammo type downside and its potent damage from being a special weapon. Unfortunately, the Ariana's Vow only receives a 30% damage buff per stack, maxing out at 300% after 10 hits, but in activities with barrier champions where you can rock special finishers and finders to fuel your ammo needs, it can still feel pretty good. And if you're concerned about burning through your special ammo too quickly, you can pair Ariana's with something like the 7th Seraph Officer Revolver with 4th times the charm in the kinetic slot to have an infinite ammo alternative to proc your Lucky Pants. However, after all of my testing and gameplay with the Lucky Pants, my absolute favorite hand cannon pairing by far was the Crimson. Given that it fires in 3-round bursts, Crimson can hit the 10-stack 600% damage buff cap faster than any of its competitors, and its relatively quickly burned through magazine size can be made up for with the fact that it fully reloads itself on precision final blows. Additionally, any final blow will result in an immediate 40 HP heal and begin health regeneration to continue to heal you up to full so long as you avoid damage. At the end of the day though, there are so many hand cannons that feel hilariously fun with these boots, including goofier picks like Sunshot, Last Word, and Ace of Spades. However, if you care about effectiveness and efficiency above all else, I would recommend that you drift towards the Crimson, Ariana's Vow, and Malfeasance in that order of priority. But there is still so much more that this build can do to complement our guillotine-like hand cannons, beginning with our first aspect, Knock 'em Down, which enhances our super abilities by granting our 6-shot Golden Gun damage resistance, our 3-shot Precision Golden Gun increased duration, and our Blade Barrage extra knives, and therefore extra damage. I tested all 3 supers extensively with this build, and ultimately found that to the surprise of no one, Blade Barrage felt the best by far in pretty much every PvE situation. Our second aspect with this build is On Your Mark, which grants a stacking weapon handling and reload speed buff on precision final blows, maxing out at 3 stacks, with class ability activations immediately granting 3 stacks of On Your Mark. Needless to say, both of these stat boosts are absolutely incredible for this build, for faster hand cannon reload speeds to get extra bullets in before the damage buff fall off, and to more easily and quickly swap weapons to activate the Lucky Pants. And speaking of the dodges that we can use to immediately max out our On Your Mark stacks, we have 3 options to choose from. The Marksman dodge is a great choice for maxing out DPS. With a 14-second cooldown at tier 10 mobility, it allows for an instant magazine refresh on demand for every rotation of Lucky Pants damage stacking, providing the ability to fire off more bullets and pump out more damage before that 5.5 second buff timer expires. Acrobat's dodge might seem great as well in theory, granting Radiant on activation for a 25% weapon damage buff that stacks with Lucky Pants. However, with a 41-second cooldown at tier 10 mobility, it falls short to its Radiant providing counterpart in the Gambler's dodge, which can refund your melee ability when used near enemies on a 19-second cooldown at the same mobility tier. But you might be wondering what that has to do with the Radiant buff, which is where our first fragment in the Ember of Torches comes in, which grants the Radiant buff to yourself and all nearby allies on powered melee hits, meaning that Gambler's Dodge, which grants us our melee ability every 19 seconds, basically grants us Radiant every 19 seconds, which is much better than that of the 41-second Acrobat's Dodge. It's worth noting as well that the melee ability of choice for landing powered hits and acquiring this Radiant buff is the Knife Trick melee ability, due to it being the best melee ability for killing enemy targets. This is extremely important because the second component of our previously mentioned Knock 'em Down aspect is a full melee ability refund when landing powered melee final blows while Radiant, including the melee final blow that makes you Radiant from Ember of Torches. This shifts the Gambler's Dodge to more of a contingency plan in higher end content, and actually absolves us of needing it entirely in lower end content where powered melee final blows are more guaranteed. Ultimately, Marksman Dodge is better suited for directly aiding in the Lucky Pants rapid fire gunslinging power fantasy, whereas Gambler's Dodge is directed towards improving your overall damage. You can't really go wrong with either one, so I'd recommend siding with whichever one better suits your needs. Moving on to our other fragments, we'll want the Ember of Benevolence in slot 2 for 200% increased base ability regeneration to all abilities when granting solar buffs, like Radiant, to allies. After that is the Ember of Searing, which restores melee energy and generates fire sprites on scorched target defeats. We'll take advantage of these fire sprites with the Ember of Mercy for a 2-second restoration healing buff when scavenging them, and round off our fragment ensemble with the Ember of Solace to increase that restoration buff from 2 to 3 seconds, and our Radiant buffs from 8 to 12. Now, as far as grenade selection goes for this build, this is another category that is completely up to you. Typically, I recommend more defensive options like healing grenades for more dangerous higher end content like Grandmaster Nightfalls, while drifting over to the damage side of the family in Thermites, Solars, and Fusions when things like Fire Sprite Restoration and Crimson Kills can reliably keep me healthy. But we still have more weapon damage buffs and ability regeneration to add to the mix from our mod setup, beginning with a Kinetic Siphon on our helmet and Reaper on the class item to generate orbs of power through kinetic weapon multi-kills and weapon final blows after class ability cast respectively. We'll then scavenge these orbs to gain stacks of armor charge to fuel our 2 copies of kinetic surge on our boots for a 17% kinetic weapon damage buff. And with a stack of time dilation on the class item, those armor charge stacks will last for 15 seconds apiece, up from the base of 10. Next up, we'll want to introduce a kinetic loader onto our gloves for higher hand cannon uptime. After that is all of our ability regeneration mods, like 2 stacks of impact induction on the gloves for grenade refund when dealing melee damage of any kind, and bomber on the class item for a chunk of grenade refund when dodging. Finally, if you have room for it, you can slot a copy of either Innervation or Better Already on the boots for grenade refund or health regeneration on orb pickup, respectively. You'll round this mod setup out with resists and reserves on the chest, finder mods on the helmet, and stat mods on all 5 pieces, prioritizing resilience, mobility, and discipline in that order. And down in the description, you can find a Destiny item manager link to copy it all over to your Guardian in just 1 click, and a MOBALYTICS written guide link to be able to reference any piece of this build anytime. Altogether, between your fully stacked Lucky Pants, armor charged kinetic surges, and solar radiant buffs, you're walking up to any enemy that gets in your way with an infinite 923% hand cannon damage buff. If that isn't enough to convince you to subscribe, then I don't know what is. I hope you enjoyed today's build video. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.